Now, I have been invited to come on the Losers Vote March on Saturday, but unfortunately I'm washing my hair all day, so I can't make it.
Well, there's a lot of it, so I do understand. But that's, it's all about priorities, isn't it? You can either keep your hair clean or you try and save the country from the madness that you people have plunged it into.
And we've already plumbed the depths. Let's talk about what's going to happen. Now, there's talk now, not just of an Irish backstop, but a backstop to the backstop. Now, you were very closely involved in the negotiations for the Good Friday peace agreement when you were working for Tony Blair. Then and we all know that was an amazing achievement to bring peace to Northern Ireland. But we also know there's, as always with anything like this, there's always a little bit of fudging along the way. Do you think that it is possible to fudge the Northern Irish situation when it comes to Brexit?
I think it's very, very difficult. And I mean, you're right that the Good Friday Agreement was full of some very straightforward and some incredibly difficult compromises. And both when John Major was Prime Minister and when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, both the British government and some of the parties involved, frankly, sometimes had to look the other way because there were things going on that you maybe wish that they weren't, but in the bigger picture, you were trying to get to a resolution of a conflict that many, many people said could never be solved. But I do think, I watched Theresa May's statement yesterday. I thought Pat McFadden, the Labour MP, said something absolutely spot on. He said that during the referendum, despite John Major and Tony Blair going over there, and despite the Irish business community trying to make it an issue, there was willful disregard for these issues. And since the referendum, it's been worse because people, I think to be fair to Theresa May, she recognised the problem is a real one. But I was on the television with John Redwood yesterday, whether it's Ian Duncan Smith, Alan Patterson, Boris Johnson, all of what I call the Brexit extremists, they refuse to acknowledge that there is a real problem here. And that problem is how do you reconcile the commitment in a treaty that's been lodged at the United Nations, that's been passed by referendums north and south, and that is a fundamental part of the peace agreement that has, let's be honest, given us relative peace. How do you reconcile that with a trade deal which, at its heart, has to understand that the border arrangements will have to change. And that's what none of these people will acknowledge.
OK, can I just ask a favour? Just if you could, the phone line's a little bit on the fuzzy side. If you could try and hold it a little bit closer to your mouth, I'd be very, very grateful indeed. But this is the difficult thing, isn't it? Is that you're saying, the Brexit extremists, i.e. people who voted Leave and campaigned for Leave, just the opposite side of you, don't acknowledge the difficulty. But then we do get the likes of David Trimble, the former Irish leader, and Kenny, people like that who I think probably do know what they're talking about, and they don't think it's an issue that is hard to resolve.
But they haven't produced a piece of paper. I mean, the other thing I remember from Good Friday... No,
they have. There is a plan. There is a very clear plan about how to deal with the Irish border, isn't there?
There is, and it's been shot to pieces literally within about half an hour of being published because it doesn't recognise this fundamental point. If we crash out on WTO terms... If we leave... There has to be an infrastructure. And the thing is that, we're all coming at this from our perspective. I accept that I'm biased in many ways, but equally, David Trimble is somebody who's driven by and I don't criticise him for this, but he's driven by visceral fear of a united Ireland. And there are elements, I'm not saying this of David Trimble, there are elements within the unionist community in Northern Ireland who actually wouldn't mind going to a hard border because that sort of puts that one, for their perspective, it lays that one to rest. All I'm saying is these are mind-blowingly complicated issues, and they were sold to the British people in the referendum as being very, very straightforward.
But Alastair Campbell, it is the case, is it not, that we have effectively two different systems of government working in Republic Island and Northern Ireland. We've got different VAT rates, different tax rate, use different currency, drive in miles per hour, not kilometres per hour. Lots of different things change when you cross that completely open, soft border right now. The government is able to collect VAT quite adequately, tens and tens of billions of pounds every year from people who are buying and purchasing goods and moving them around the country without any difficulty whatsoever. It's all done administratively in the back room. We don't have someone standing there when someone buys something in a shop saying, right, I'd like my VAT now. There's no reason why we can't deal with any customs payments, which would be a fraction of the VAT payments, in exactly the same way.
I'm afraid that's not true. There's a reason why we and the Irish joined the European Union around the same time. We've always been, since then, in the same, if you like, basic core economic institutions. We are tearing ourselves out of that, and in so doing, we are being on the only, what would be the only land border between us and the rest of the European Union. We're talking about this as though it's just Ireland. It's the border with the European Union. And if we are moving to a system which no deal represents, and which, frankly, some of the deals that have been put forward also represent, then we're moving to a place where there will be infrastructure.
Okay.
And, we can hear David Trimble. I will also listen to the Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland, who has been very, very clear in warning this is an incredibly dangerous thing to do.
Let's move aside a little bit from that, if we can, just to cover more topics, because the big issue there is not just about Northern Ireland, it's also about how long that the UK stays tied to customs rules, whether it's the UK as a whole, whether it's just Northern Ireland. Again, the EU is fascinating. They're always saying we mustn't cherry pick, and yet for some reason seem to think they can cherry pick some aspects of this. But the Prime Minister promised yesterday that the UK would not end up in permanent limbo tied to the customs union and rules, but she wouldn't confirm that we would definitely end of being tied to customs rules by December 2021, the so-called transition period. There is a concern on the Leavers side that this is all a cunning wheeze to tie us into the EU. It's Brexit in name only, Brino it's being called, and that this is all just being choreographed as a big sort of row going on with the EU. And in fact, a deal's been done long ago with Angela Merkel. Prime Minister knows what deal she's going to get. They reckon that we push later and later, October, November, December. The fears over no deal, or Project Fear Mark 3, will basically lead to even the most staunch Brexiteers saying, do you know what, it's not worth the risk, we'll agree to a deal. And then we effectively stay in a sort of vassal state of the EU. Is that what's going on?
I don't think so, and I think it's an incredible. If that is what's going on in her mind, it's an unbelievably risky strategy. Because I think what you saw yesterday, and this is her problem, that there are elements now within her party, and a lot of them will back down. I think a lot of them will all blow hard and bluster, but I think some of them are so ideological about this that will be unacceptable. So then she's reliant in terms of, I do think it's part of her strategy to try to do something late and then just try to ram it through the House of Commons at a time when people are terrified of no deal. And that is, I think, what she's trying to do in trying to appeal to some Labour MPs. But to be honest, Julia, part of what the march is about on Saturday is showing Labour MPs as well that if they vote through a deal that they know, for different reasons to Jacob Rees-Mogg, you and Boris Johnson and all the rest of it, but if they ram through a deal that they know is going to damage their constituents, they're going to pay a price for that as well. And I think what happened yesterday, you're absolutely right in your introduction, nobody is satisfied with her deal. And whether you're on the Brexit side of the argument, where you, I think rightly, would be angry at saying, hold on a minute, we're paying in loads of money and we're not able to do trade deals, we're getting nothing in return. And on my side of the argument, we're basically saying, what is the point of this? All the upheaval, the economic dislocation, for what? And that's why I do think, actually, I think the turnout on Saturday is going to be big, because I think across the piece...
17.4 million big?
No.
No, funny that.
No, but that's because most people don't go on marches.
No, exactly.
Look, and the other thing, let me just say something about the 17.4 million. I'm not saying, by the way, that they're all extremists, and I'm not saying either, I've never ever said that I don't understand the reasons why they voted leave. But just as I respect the reasons that they did, and by the way, the government is addressing none of them, and nor is the opposition, frankly, because they're consumed by Brexit, nor does that mean that I wouldn't respect them if they actually did what an awful lot of people are now doing, and that's saying, do you know what, I think we need to look at this again.
Except an awful lot of people aren't doing that. Now, can I just ask you, I mean, we've got the likes of, Dominic Greaves, Anna Soubry, I think Ken Clarke, Nicky Morgan as well, basically saying they can't vote for the Chequers deal because unless it was put to the second referendum, a third referendum, in fact, is what it would be, before they got to decide. And an awful lot about how we need to respect the views of the 48%, and that not just the views of the 52% in coming to a deal. Can you tell me, if Remain had won by 52% to 48%, what would have been the compromise that do you think should have been offered to the Leave voters for that 48% of Leave voters to be respected? Given that we would have just still remained in the EU, what compromise do you think we would have got?
Well, I think, but if I think back to both the Scottish referendum, when David Cameron, he won more narrowly than he should have done, and then the first thing he did was basically say, right, you Scottish whingers, now it's English laws for English people, English votes for English laws. And likewise with Theresa May, she didn't try to unite the country around what was a very, very divided debate. And so I do think there's a problem there. So I think the answer to your question is, I think that had Remain won, and I can't speak for David Cameron because he would have remained Prime Minister, but at the very least, there should have been an understanding of the reasons why people felt so moved to leave, up to 48% as it would have been, and actually an understanding of that, and then addressing some of those issues, including immigration, including inequality, including some of the pressures on public services that people complained about, including the feeling that London was ahead of the rest of the country and the rest of the country had to be given opportunities to catch up.
No, I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about the actual, in terms of the actual legal constitutional relationship that we have with the EU, as the UK's relationship with the EU. The argument from Remoaners like yourself is that there needs to be a compromise. You want it to be overturned altogether, but at the very least, you're worse. If you don't get that, you're saying we should have a Brexit that respects the views of the 48% as well. What Remain situation would have respected the views of Leave voters? There isn't one, is there?
Yes, there is, because I've just given you them. Because I've
it wouldn't have changed our constitutional relationship with the EU.
No, we would have remained a member of the European Union. We would have had to understand and should have understood the reasons why people felt so angry.
That's nothing to do with an actual constitutional deal.
Julia, if you just listen for a minute, I know you love the sound of your own voice.
No, you're just repeating what you've already said, which doesn't answer my question.
You haven't actually got the point I'm making. The Constitution. So, for example, David Cameron went and tried to get an arrangement on immigration. He failed. Yeah. Okay. Now, that is the sort of issue that had he won, and by the way, I think with Macron there and Merkel there, this is a tragedy for me. I think a British Prime Minister would have been able actually to push for the sort of reform that the Leave vote was saying was needed. So it's not as simple as saying it's all about Europe. When I talk about things like inequalities at home, that is one of the factors that led to people voting Leave.
I thought we just did it because we're all racist and xenophobic and ignorant, which is what we've been told by people like you for the last couple of years. Can I just come on to one completely different topic, Alastair, while I've got you on the line? I know you're giving evidence in the House of Commons later today to the Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee, and it's related to, I know, a subject very close to your heart, mental health. What are you telling them?
Well, first of all, I must rebut what you just said, because you keep caricaturing other people's opinions. I have never, ever said that the 17.4 million are stupid or racist or anything else. And I've said repeatedly, I understand why they voted Leave. So do not misrepresent what I say. You can misrepresent other people if you must. On mental health, the Select Committee, and I'm glad they're doing this, they're looking at the potential impact of sport and culture on the mental health and well-being of people. And I think they've called me because I have talked in the past about, in fact, funny enough, I took your call whilst on I've just banged out a quick hour and a half on the exercise bike. I find that sport is a fundamental part of my well-being. I think also that given that the public services are so under pressure, I wish there was more money going into mental health, but as it's not happening, we are going to have to look for things such as social prescribing, where we actually can recommend activity in the community that will help address some of these issues of loneliness and mental ill health. And I think that I'm glad that they're looking at it. I wish we didn't have a reason a need to do it, but I think it's a really, really important area, as is art, by the way, and music. I've talked to you before about my brother who had schizophrenia. His life was vastly improved by the fact that every single day of his life he played music. And I think these sorts of things, they're not expensive. They don't have to bust the bank of the health department, but we need to think about those things because the money for mental health services just is not there.